The summons. The transport ship's docking clamps released with a pneumatic hiss as Ambassador Marcus Rain stepped onto the crystalline surface of Lumini Station. The moon station orbited the gas giant Aurelius, its transparent walkways offering vertigo-inducing views of swirling amber clouds below. Marcus had spent 3 months preparing for these negotiations, studying Etherean culture, their complex social hierarchies, and their unusual courtship rituals that somehow intertwined with political dealings. The reception hall glowed with soft bioluminescent panels that responded to movement, creating ripples of light wherever delegates walked. Marcus adjusted his formal diplomatic attire, searching the crowd for Chancellor Velora, but instead found himself captivated by a figure standing apart from the others. She moved like liquid starlight, her silvery skin catching and reflecting the ambient illumination in mesmerizing patterns. Her dress seemed woven from nebular clouds, shifting between deep purples and midnight blues. Before he could approach properly, slender fingers wrapped around his wrist. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through his entire body, not unpleasant but definitely startling. She pulled him with surprising strength through a hidden panel in the wall he hadn't even noticed existed. "You need to come with me. Now," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. The corridor she led him through pulsed with dim violet light, and Marcus found himself following without resistance, drawn by something beyond mere curiosity. They emerged in a private observatory, its domed ceiling revealing the infinite cosmos above. She finally turned to face him fully, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Her eyes held depths like distant galaxies, swirling with colors he couldn't name. "I am Serafina Velora," she said, releasing his wrist but stepping closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "And tonight, Ambassador Rain, you belong to me." "That's rather presumptuous," Marcus managed, though his voice came out rougher than intended. She smiled, revealing perfect pearl-white teeth. "Not presumptuous. Necessary. There are forces at work here that threaten everything your Earth and my Etheria have built toward. The official negotiations are theater. The real decisions." She moved even closer, her hand resting lightly on his chest, "will be made between us, in shadows and whispers. Tell me, Marcus Rain, are you brave enough to trust an alien woman with your world's future?" Beneath silver moons. The private dining chamber glowed with soft bioluminescent panels that responded to emotion, currently pulsing with deep indigos and violets that betrayed the Empress's inner turmoil. Lyric sat across from Nixera at an intimate table carved from a single crystal, their meal of exotic delicacies largely untouched. "You're curious about Aria," Nixera stated, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, which contained a swirling liquid that looked like captured aurora. "I'm curious about many things," Lyric replied carefully, leaning forward, "including why the sight of her affected you so deeply." The Empress stood abruptly, moving to the balcony. Lyric followed, standing close enough to feel the cool energy radiating from her skin. The 3 moons had risen, bathing everything in silver luminescence. 25 years ago, I loved someone," she whispered, her usual commanding presence softening into something achingly vulnerable. "A human diplomat, like yourself. Our union was forbidden, deemed impossible by our biologists. When I became pregnant, it was called a miracle and a catastrophe." Lyric's hand moved instinctively toward hers, stopping just short of contact. "What happened?" "Politics. Fear. My advisors convinced me the child would threaten everything, neither fully human nor celestian, belonging nowhere." Tears like liquid starlight tracked down her cheeks. "I was told she died at birth. But those eyes. Aria has her father's eyes." This time, Lyric didn't hesitate. He took her hand, and the energy between them sparked visibly in the air. Nixera turned to face him, her free hand rising to rest against his chest. "I see him in you," she breathed, moving closer. "The same warmth, the same fearless compassion. It terrifies me." "Why?" Lyric's voice had gone husky, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist where her pulse fluttered like a caged star. "Because I swore I would never feel this again." She tilted her face up toward his. "Yet here you are, making my carefully constructed walls crumble with just a look." A door chimed, and Aria entered hesitantly. "Your radiance, I was summoned." Nyxera didn't pull away from Lyric. Instead, she extended her other hand toward Arya. "Come closer, child. There are truths that have been hidden too long." Arya approached slowly, and in the moonlight, the resemblance was undeniable. The way she held her shoulders, the tilt of her head, all echoes of the Empress. "You feel it too, don't you?" Nyxera asked softly. "The connection. The pool of shared blood." "I've always felt incomplete," Arya admitted. "Like part of my history was written in a language I couldn't read." Lyric watched as mother and daughter stood facing each other, the weight of stolen years between them, while his hand remained clasped with Nyxera's, anchoring her to the present. The masquerade. The diplomatic gala transformed the station's grand ballroom into a wonderland of floating lights and anti-gravity fountains. Delegates from 15 systems mingled, their various forms creating a kaleidoscope of diversity. Marcus wore the traditional Earth formal wear, while Seraphina entered in an ensemble that seemed to be made of captured starlight itself, drawing every eye in the room. They had agreed to maintain distance, to avoid suspicion, but her eyes found his across the crowded floor with an intensity that made the space between them feel charged. Chancellor Velora's speech droned on about cooperation and mutual prosperity, but Marcus noticed Seraphina's subtle hand signal, their prearranged code. He excused himself from a group of Martian delegates and made his way toward the balcony. She was already there, having somehow slipped away from her father's side without anyone noticing. "The evidence we need is in the secure communication hub," she whispered, producing a small device. "But we need biometric access from both a human and an Etherian." They moved through the service corridors, the distant music from the gala providing cover for their footsteps. In the communication hub, their bodies had to remain in close contact to maintain the dual biometric lock while downloading the files. Seraphina's back pressed against Marcus's chest, her warmth seeping through the formal wear. "Your heart is racing," she observed softly, tilting her head back to look at him. "Adrenaline," he replied, though they both knew it was more than that. The download completed, revealing correspondence that confirmed their worst fears, a shadow faction planning to sabotage the trade negotiations to justify military action. Seraphina turned in his arms, the datapad between them showing the damning evidence. "They'll destroy everything, create a war neither side wants." Marcus cupped her face gently, surprised when she leaned into his touch. "We'll stop them. Together." Their lips met in the dim blue light of the hub, a kiss that started gentle but deepened with the passion they'd been suppressing. Her fingers tangled in his hair while his arms pulled her closer, the conspiracy momentarily forgotten in the heat of connection. She tasted like stardust and promises, like danger and salvation intertwined. A sound in the corridor broke them apart. Seraphina grabbed his hand, leading him through a maintenance shaft that opened behind an ornamental waterfall in the ballroom's adjacent relaxation chamber. The space was small, intimate, with the sound of water masking any conversation. She turned to him, eyes dark with desire and determination. "After tonight, everything changes. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus pulled her close again, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "I've been prepared since the moment you pulled me into that observatory." Trial by stars. The ancient Etherian rite of trust took place in the station's zero-gravity chamber, where participants had to navigate together without the comfort of solid ground. Chancellor Velora watched with disapproval as his daughter defied centuries of tradition by standing as Marcus's partner rather than his challenger. She wore the ceremonial bands that marked her as his chosen advocate, a declaration that sent whispers through the assembled crowd. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said as they entered the chamber together. Seraphina's hand found his, interlacing their fingers with practiced ease. "Yes, I do. My people need to see that humans and Etherians can be equals, can trust each other completely." The trial began with synchronized movement through floating obstacles, requiring them to push and pull each other through the air, maintaining constant physical contact or risk drifting apart. Marcus learned to read her body language, to anticipate her movements, while she guided him through the more complex maneuvers with gentle touches and whispered encouragements. Halfway through, the lights dimmed to simulate deep space conditions. They had to rely entirely on touch and trust, navigating by the sound of each other's breathing and the warmth of skin against skin. In the darkness, Seraphina pulled herself along his body to whisper in his ear, "The conspirators are watching. They expect us to fail. Then let's disappoint them, Marcus replied, wrapping an arm around her waist and using their combined momentum to spin through a complex series of rings. They emerged from the trial triumphant but exhausted, floating in each other's arms as the lights returned. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some applauded while others, including the Chancellor, looked troubled. But in that moment, suspended between worlds, Marcus saw only Serafina's radiant smile and felt only the rightness of her body against his. Later, in her private quarters, she tended to the bruises they'd both acquired during the trial. Her touch was gentle, methodical, but charged with unspoken emotion. "My father confronted me," she said quietly. "Demanded I end whatever this is between us." "And?" Marcus asked, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. She straddled his lap, framing his face with her hands. "I told him that some bonds transcend politics. That what we have could unite our peoples in ways treaties never could." She kissed him then, deep and passionate, her body pressing against his with desperate need. "I chose you, Marcus. Not as ambassador, but as the man who makes me want to rewrite the stars themselves." They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies like new languages, finding that despite their different origins, desire and connection were universal constants. The choice eternal. The conspiracy's leaders revealed themselves during what should have been the final negotiation session. Admiral Chen from Earth's military faction and Etherian Defense Minister Zoraith stood together, weapons drawn, having taken the council chambers hostage. Their demand was simple: war, or watch as they destroyed both delegations and blamed it on the other side. Marcus and Serafina entered through separate doors, playing their parts until the last moment. When Zoraith aimed at Marcus, Serafina threw herself in front of him. When Chen targeted her, Marcus did the same. Their synchronized protection of each other, broadcast live to both civilizations, created a moment of profound symbolism. "You would die for her?" Chen asked Marcus, disbelief coloring his tone. "I would live for her," Marcus corrected, taking Serafina's hand. "Which is infinitely harder and infinitely more valuable." Serafina addressed both conspirators in the harmonic tones of her people, but with steel underneath. "You fear unity because it diminishes your power. But look around you." The other delegates, both human and Etherian, had surrounded the conspirators. "Unity is already here." The security forces moved in, but it was Chancellor Velora who surprised everyone by personally arresting Zoraith. "My daughter taught me something," he announced. "Sometimes the heart sees truths that politics blinds us to." Later, in Serafina's sanctuary, a private dome where she cultivated rare cosmic orchids, Marcus found her standing before the vast window overlooking Aurelius. She'd changed into a flowing gown that seemed to capture nebular clouds, and when she turned to him, her eyes held entire galaxies of emotion. "The new treaty passed," she said softly, "including the amendment allowing for formal unions between our species." Marcus crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Is that a proposal, Ambassador Velora?" She laughed, the sound like chimes in stellar wind. "That's Serafina to you. Always Serafina." She kissed him deeply, her body molding against his with familiar heat. "And yes, it's a proposal. My people bond for eternity. Marcus, can you accept that?" He lifted her onto the window's wide ledge, stepping between her legs as she wrapped them around him. "I accepted that the moment you told me I belonged to you," he murmured against her throat, feeling her pulse quicken under his lips. They celebrated their private victory slowly, thoroughly, christening their new beginning as outside the window, two civilizations began to merge like binary stars drawn into each other's orbit. In her arms, Marcus discovered that home wasn't a planet or a station, but the space between heartbeats shared with someone who chose you across all the vast distances of space. Serafina pulled him closer, whispering against his lips, "Tonight, tomorrow, and for all eternity, you belong to me, as I belong to you." The stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small beings who loved beneath them, yet somehow Marcus felt they approved, blessing this union that would rewrite the future of two worlds through the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear.